my webinar today. Those who don't know anything about myself, 30 years ago I started a short distance moving company in Australia called Mini Movers. I still have that company today. I've grown on. Today I live more or less live in the Philippines, and I operate 6 different businesses in 4 different countries. So I'm a serial entrepreneur, and along my little journey I've become a little bit of an expert on the Philippines and how to engage and what to do and what not to do in the Philippines. And around that I run another business called Mike's Manila Tours, where we teach people. Today we've got 4 other panelists, 5 panelists all together counting myself, and we have a special guest with us today from a tour that we finished yesterday. So introducing my guest first, we're not talking yet, we're just, Phil McGregor is joining us from the tour. The last tour finished last night, so we're a little bit sore and sorry today, as you are at the end of the tour. Phil's the owner of an Australian company called Ads Academy. He's an expert, absolute expert in Facebook. He really knows his stuff. I'd say he's probably a leading expert in Australia around Facebook and in Australia and New Zealand around Facebook. And he speaks on the topic around the world. And he's really, really good at delivering cheap and relevant prospects and leads to business owners. So Phil will be joining us and chatting with us a little bit later about his views of the Philippines and what he thought of the tour and things like that. We, on the panel today, we also have Miss Lota Samonte. Lota owns a company called Your Virtual People. She's a Filipino. She grew that business from nothing. There are a few people around. I'm one of her mentors, and a couple of other of my friends mentor her, and we encouraged her, and she bootstrapped a back office process BPO business, a staff leasing business from nothing, and grew it up to quite a substantial business today. So Ms. Loder will be talking to us a little bit later about what she does and how she does it, and those services as well. We also have Lee Shattuck with us as well. Lee has been known to me for a few years. He used to be somebody we used to join on the tour. As such, he moved on from that a little while ago, and he's formed a company that I have a little bit of an ownership in as well, called Shore 360. It's a staff leasing business. That's where we're sitting today at the moment in Clark and near Angeles in the Philippines. So Lee will be joining us and talking a little bit about what he does as well. He's been up here for a number of years. He's married to a Filipino. He knows his stuff. He knows what he's doing, and he's very, very good at what he does. We have Aya joining us. Ms. Aya is the Filipino owner of a specialist service called Straight Arrow. Aya's joining us from London. Actually, it's 3 o'clock in the morning in London, and Aya is she runs a specialised marketing services here in the Philippines, an outsourcing company that does creative work and for Australians, UK, USA, and the Middle East. In less than 5 years, she's grown that team from 2 to 175 creative people, and she wins awards around for doing that as well. And it's got some fantastic customers in amongst that. Mark Cottle is also joining us. Mark is an Australian who spends, I think, about half his time in the Philippines and half his time in Melbourne. He's an accountant. He runs a specialised accountancy service here, and we're talking a little bit about his history and what he does later on as we go through and talk about that. And of course, Phil I've already talked about, which is good. So if I could just talk for a few minutes about the Philippines. Offshoring, of course, is the big thing that's happening now. It's changing the world dramatically. It's a worldwide trend. It's not just a thing that's happening in Australia or out of Australia. It's going into all sorts of countries around the world. Basically, the Western countries have got very high in their wages and fat and are being and their margins are being squeezed by globalization, and a lot of businesses now are trying to source services and people and engage people in other countries where wages are a lot cheaper. And of course, offshoring countries like Ireland and Poland and India and Vietnam and Malaysia and a lot of Central American countries, and of course the Philippines is very, very attractive. The reason that we like Philippines is quite unique. That Philippines is a country that has 105 million people. It has 39 million people in its workforce. over 100 years ago, in fact about 120 years ago roughly, the Philippines became a colony of the USA. And when it became a colony of the USA, the Americans put in their education system, they put it in here as compulsory education system, compulsory in English. So the Filipinos have been running a fully Americanized education system for over 100 years in English. And of course, because the Spanish ruled them before that, they're Christian-based. 88% of the population are Catholic, are very, very Christian-based. And what that means to us is that they have very, very similar, exactly the same core values. We share, of all the countries in the world, we probably share the core values closer to the Philippines than anybody else. And of course, they're English, well educated in English, and that makes them an ideal country to offshore to, and have very, very low wages compared to our wages indeed. So that's why we use the Philippines. The industry itself, the offshoring industry, there's about 7 different ways that you can engage services or people overseas. I teach all 7 on my business learning tour. Today we're going to basically cover 2 or 3 of them. Miss Loda is a BPO business. Your Virtual People is a BPO business that does staff leasing. Staff leasing is when you can lease, and all her people work in an office situation, and you can she will rent you a desk, a computer, and the person, and engage the right person to work for you, and make sure they come to work every day and sit there and do your work every day, and you tell them what to do, which means you can build and grow your team. Same with Lee with Shore 360. They're a seat leasing business. With Straight Arrow is a specialised service. So the same as you would go to a marketing company in the Western world, you'd probably go to IR exactly the same way. And she specialises in very leading edge sales funnels and graphic design and all those sort of things. She'll cover that when she talks to us later. Mark's the same. Mark's a specialised service as well. You would engage Mark exactly the same as you would engage an accountancy firm in Australia, or accountancy firms actually engage Mark, or you have their back office processes done up here. So he does work for a lot of Australian accountancy firms where he supplies accountants to them, and he'll talk about that as well later. And Phil, of course, is a guest that's coming in, just been on tour. So what I'd like to do now is go around each one of our panelists, and I'd like them to give me 3 to 5 minutes, if they can, about themselves, who they are, what they've been doing, and if they can please share a little bit of your views as to what you think about engaging businesses, particularly from Australia. So if I can start with Miss Loda, I think Lottie, if you'd like to hop in now and tell us about yourself and your business, and just share some of your little tidbits about offshoring.
Hi everybody, I'm Lota, and I'm the CEO and founder of Your Virtual People. We are a small business specialist. We provide administrative and back office support to small businesses in Australia. We are a Filipino-owned company. Our long years of experience in the BPO, which is business process outsourcing industry, help us specialize in finding, managing, and keeping the right people, as well as using the right systems and setup for a remote business structure. So I myself, few years ago, was a call center agent, an admin, executive assistant. I've been there, I've done that, and our services evolves around the experience that we have, so we definitely know what we're providing. It's been a great journey doing business with Australians. It's been we learn as well from them, and it's not hard to work with you guys. It's because our culture and our background is not far from each other, and how we value people. We're on the same page on that. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. And she, of course, owns a company called Your Virtual People. I think Lee now, background and a little bit about Shore 360 and your views on offshoring.
Thanks, Mike. By way of background, I'm an Australian citizen. I owned and operated a large outsourcing company in Australia for many, many years. Sold it to a New Zealand government department in the early 2000s, and by 2010 that company was coming under a great deal of pressure from international service providers. It was under threat and we needed to do something quickly, so the same company engaged me to come to the Philippines in 2010 and set up an operation here, starting with just 15 people. As late as last October, when I finished that project, there were 300 odd staff working here in the Philippines, and it basically future-proofed that business to the global pressures of global sourcing. Along the way, I stepped on a lot of landmines. I learned a great deal about how to do it right and how to do it wrong. And more recently, I've positioned myself in the Philippines in a company called Shore 360, similar to Lota's operation. It's a staff leasing organisation. What we bring to the market, though, is the experience of having gone through what many of you would potentially go through if you entertained offshoring, and helping businesses in Australia to get it right. And to realise their objectives of turning to offshoring as a solution around making your business more robust, more cost-effective, and bulletproof in today's competitive market. So I look forward to the opportunity of taking any questions around how to deal with that. Culture is important. Mike mentioned that I'm married to a Filipino. I've lived in the Philippines for now 5 years. I understand the culture, and it is a critical part of getting it right, and blending it with your business back in Australia. So look forward to a chat with anybody who wants to ask. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you very much, Lee. And Aya, Aya from London, if you'd like to join us and tell us about yourself, your history, and Straight Arrow and what it does, and a little bit around your view of offshoring and working with Western businesses.
Sure, Mike. Good morning, everybody. It's hello from cold London. I've been in outsourcing for quite a while now. My background is actually in advertising and marketing, and then I've worked for a systems integrator. We put call centers together, build it up, put in the technology, and then lease it. And then I started this company, Straight Arrow, about almost 6 years ago. And what we do is, like Mike said, we're like creative assistants. We execute creative campaigns. Most of our clients are digital agencies, but we also have some enterprise clients, entrepreneur clients. I think that the journey has been very exciting. Outsourcing it's just the way that the globe is now flattening, so work is going where it makes sense. The way that we complement businesses, I think, is very interesting. I'm here in London now because we're working with our clients to understand what their strategies are for 2016 and understand how we can execute that. So what we do is assist clients, business owners, digital agencies who know what exactly they want to do. We do the how. We do the design, we do the actual coding, we do inbound marketing and things like that. I think the biggest challenge and the most interesting one is bridging the communication gap. I was just sharing with a client last night, we had a new joiner and she did a great job, and the client said, "You're so wicked." And wicked in the Philippines is, you're a witch. You've not done a good job. And in London, it's the coolest thing. So just things like that. But every time we're able to talk and we're able to straighten those things out, I think we make the world a smaller place. So it's really, really great. I'll be happy to take questions on how, design is done from offshore, how that kind of working relationship can help your company. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. I'd just like to remind everybody that we're going to take questions about anything you like at all around offshoring or anything you like as we go along. So you can type the questions in here and send them in through the bottom panel, and we'll be answering those questions as we go through. So Mark Cottle is an Australian accountant who came up here and made a few mistakes, I believe, but got it all sorted out now and doing very, very well. So Mark, if you'd like to join us and tell us a little bit about your little journey, who you are, and of course your observations around offshoring.
Yeah, g'day guys. It's interesting, I echo what Lee was saying earlier about stepping on landmines. I've stepped on quite a few along the way because when I came up here 4 years ago, So I started an accounting firm. I'm a chartered accountant from Australia. I started that firm in 2011 with a friend of mine, and I was aware of the lower cost of labour in the Philippines. So in 2011, that was the year that Xero accounting software was really taking off in Australia. So I married up the idea in my mind of putting an accounting team on in the Philippines and serving our Australian clients. So I came up here, I did my own little tour. This type of stuff didn't exist back then that I was aware of, and I came up and I hired one person, and we set about building up our accounting firm like that. Along the way, other accounting firms were paying attention to what we were doing and started asking me for help in setting up teams, just like I'd done for myself. So I guess accidentally, we set up a BPO as well. It was never our intent, but just through the demand, we did that. And the rest is history from there. We've got in excess of 100 staff in there in under 2 years, and mostly working for Australian accounting firms. Mostly working for Australian accounting firms. And we recently launched in the UK as well. So I'll be over in the UK in a couple of weeks, so I'm dreading it. It's my 4th trip in 1 year that I'll be over there. So I see going forward, particularly for accountants, I see technology and a global workforce is a real game changer. You know, not just for accountants, but any white-collar role. The biggest challenge for accountants, the way I see it, is real complacency. They're very comfortable with their compliance work. It comes in every year. They do the tax and that's it. But I see a real change coming in the next few years where that could be well taken away from them in terms of technology. So that's the way we see it going forward. There's a lot of accountants coming along and doing that now, and there's no stopping it. But that's the biggest risk I see for the firms in Australia. So that's my little piece there for you. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mark, and good observations as well. We're now going to bring Phil in. Phil McGregor. Phil's interesting because Phil's curious like most Australians are, and his curiosity got to him, and he decided to come up on my tour. I run a 3-day intensive learning tour. I recognise that most people don't know anything about the Philippines, but also they don't know anything about all the different options and all the things that are being done in offshoring. We run those tours. The tour finished, he came on this week's tour, first time in the Philippines. The tour finished last night. I think I'd like to be interested, Phil, in your views around what changed or what you saw here, how different it was from what you expected, and some of the opportunities. Because I think this morning, and normally the morning after one of my tour, your brain's still spinning around in like a top. So you might want to comment about some of that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Spinning like a top is a really good word for it. Just for everybody else, BPO stands for Business Process Outsourcing. I had no idea what that meant when I started on the tour. I'd asked that one specifically, and I know that's been said a few times here already. So taking a process for your business and outsourcing it. That if you hear BPO mentioned a lot, that's what it's about. Yeah, look, oh my God, the nature of it was I'm basically Mark and Lee. 6 years ago, I have a business and I want to grow, but doing it in Australia, I'm finding it really difficult to keep my costs down in a way that makes it practical for my clients to take on board. But I'm also at capacity too, so I don't have time to muck around. I don't want a learning curve that's really slow. I need to get going fast. And so when I heard about what Mike was doing, I was really intrigued, and I came here with all sorts of assumptions and all sorts of ideas about what I wanted and how I was going to do it. And what I found was it's something completely different. These guys, and I was really lucky to go into the businesses of Lotta and Aya and Lee, and I saw what they're doing, and not very long. In fact, we went to like I think about 30 businesses, and they all started with like 1 or 2 staff, and now they're all like around 100 or 500 or something like that. Once you seem to get it right, the big thing that came out of it for me is that you just go nuts, and I'm really excited about that. That's one of the big things for me that I think would be really cool going forwards is how can I go farther and faster and do it most efficiently. And one of the things I've learned is that the culture of the Filipino people is amazing. I came here because they're kind of the same, but I think what makes them different is what I need the most. And in so many respects, the way these people are, it's incredible. They love to work. In all of the businesses that I went through, you can tell they love it. The sort of jobs that drive me crazy, for example, you can see these people. They're really into it. And just one last thing. This was another really big thing for me, was about how much they love family. And I think we really miss that in Australia. I don't think family is as important to us. And I know myself, I'm working like 16-hour days, and I don't see my young family very often. And you come over here and you see what these people do, and how family is so important. And it just really brings me back to, how can I get there? How can I have the lifestyle that that I think is we're really lacking in our Australian culture. And Filipinos have really brought that out for me. So that was a big eye opener. But specifically, awesome processes. These guys they're just getting it right, and they're doing it a lot. And I think that's a big thing for me, and that's where I really want to be.
Thanks. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, good observations. It's normally a bit mind-spinning after you've been on one of my tours. It's none of it's where you think it's going to be, and it's just changed the way you think. And the business opportunities, you just suddenly enlarge. You realise how big the business opportunities are. Guys, I've got to tell you that the people, the Australian businesses that do come up here and source workers, build teams, or source specialised services and use those, the ones that get it right really get it right, and they have amazing results. They really do. Unfortunately, because they don't know what they're doing, 50% of them get it wrong and mess it up a little bit, which is why we invented the tour. I believe you should know what you're doing before you start, and then therefore you've got a much better chance of getting it right. So what I want to do, I want you to be very clear. The businesses that get it right do amazing things. My mini movers got into financial trouble about 5 or 6 years ago with the GFC. We were very, very dependent on the number of moves being done. We were very large. We had massive market saturation, and that market shrank by 60%. And if your market, when you're large and you've got a lot of market saturation, your market shrinks by 60%, you're going to have problems. And it got into strife. It really did. And two things happened to it. The market shrank, and also we started the business 30 years ago, and there was a massive great change in marketing at the same time as the so-called GFC hit us, where, in 2007 we were spending 1.2 million in the Yellow Pages book, and suddenly that didn't work. Digitized marketing, the digital world had come along, the social world had come along, and it all changed. And it took us, and it still is, by the way, taken us quite a while to grasp that and learn how to market ourselves in a new world. So my solution to that was, and understanding that I was in strife, we were shedding jobs. We believe it or not, we shed nearly 300 jobs before I decided to stop this and turn it around. And how I did that was to move the back end, a lot of the back end processes and other processes up here, and very, very quickly, luckily I nailed it right, I managed to use that to put a lot of profit on the bottom line, to put a new marketing process in line, and save the 200 odd jobs that we had left in Australia. We saved those, we went back into profit, and indeed we've now grown that back up to about 400. So in fact, operating in the Philippines has put profit on the line, changed our marketing, and saved a lot of Australian jobs, and in fact now is creating a lot of Australian jobs. And I was lucky. I'd been doing it for a while, I'd studied it, I knew a little bit about what I was doing, and I had the right people at the right time to get it right. So we do see, now I don't want to dwell too much on the negative around offshoring, but we are going to talk a little bit about that. I want to go through my panel one by one and ask them to talk about the things they see going wrong. I'll preempt Ms. Loader. Ms. Loader, I know, has clients, some new clients sometimes that don't quite understand it, and it's the clients that are the issue often more than the workers up here. So let's have an open conversation about common mistakes you see. Talk about the common mistakes you see and how the little traps that people should watch out for. So going back to Lottie, can you talk for a little bit about mistakes you see and what advice you'd give people to try and avoid those mistakes, apart from using you, of course, but just talk to people about the sort of things that go wrong when they try and offshore.
All right. With the common mistakes I see with the people that try to do outsourcing, because most of our clients, it's their first time to outsource, and that's what we're good at, actually, hand-holding these people, both the client and staff members. However, if you don't dedicate yourself into it, it's the same as the staff member. If you're a client, you don't dedicate yourself into it, which means you don't want to train. You don't want to spend time, like teaching these people, about your business and your systems or how you want it done. If you won't dedicate yourself to it, then it's not going to work. What usually fail is when, for example, the client went in the Philippines or in the tour or something like that and saw how it is being done, and then they go back, so they get it, right? And then they just transfer it to somebody who hasn't been here and doesn't understand and just let them handle it on their end. It usually doesn't work. But if whoever came here and understand, dedicate some time, they can still delegate it, but they have to be involved in setting up, especially in the first 2 months. They need to be involved. They need to dedicate training time. It will work. It's the same as hiring people in Australia. If you hire somebody, you just don't plug them in and leave them alone, right? You dedicate some time, do the training. It's the same when you do the outsourcing. You have to be there and make sure that it works out. After that, the systems and whoever you assign on that project can actually manage it and monitor it, and we help on that as well in managing the projects. But that's the common thing. And the second one usually is communication. So if my clients have challenges in the first 2 months, it's usually just a communication gap. If the staff member here is their first time to work with Australians, even if they have worked with Americans, we have to set their expectations correctly. Usually we have a process in that. If they're having challenges, we have a coaching process wherein we step in, we identify what's the cause of the challenge or the issue, and then we coach the staff member. And we also coach the client as well. Like give them tips on how to make it work or how to communicate properly with them, and also help the staff member coach them on what's being expected from them, what they can do, and what their client is expecting from them, and what their client wants them to do. And once we set that expectation correctly, then they actually work out with them. So those are the two things that commonly we encounter as a mistake or as an issue that we encounter during the first couple of months. Yes, back to you, Mike.
Very good comments, actually. I'll tell a little side story about Miss Loda. She first met me. I'm sorry about that. I'll tell a little side story about Miss Loda. We met about 3 years ago, and she'd been working for Americans and only Americans. And this here, sorry, I'm back with you. Sorry about that. I'm back with you. You can see me and hear me. That's good. Okay, a little side story about Miss Loda. We first met about 3 years ago, and she'd been working virtually for Americans. At the time I met her, she was working for an American boss and running, managing, organising, paying, and completely everything. About 120 call centre agents that were working virtually from their homes. And she was doing all that virtually from sitting in her little apartment. And the night that we first met, and with another EOA, Entrepreneurs Organisation member, Australian, and myself, she only understood half of what I said that night, because as Australians we speak very quickly, we run our words together, and we use a lot of slang. But being a good little Filipino and wanting to focus on this opportunity, she said yes, 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 all the way through. One of the first things you learn up here is to test who you're talking to make sure they understand what they do say. So it's an interesting thing that they're very Americanized and are not used to talking to us. And when they first meet us, if they're not used to speaking to an Australian, they do have trouble understanding it. However, within a few days, she fully understood everything I need. They do speak it up very quickly. Just a little side story about Filipinos and some of the interesting little challenges they have, but they do pick it up very, very, very quickly. So Lee, let's hear your the things about the mistakes you see being made and things that they should avoid and watch out for.
Okay, well, I can summarise it, I think, into 3 or 4 fundamental errors that the world makes when they come to the Philippines. And the first thing I want to say, though, that there is a fundamental difference between the word outsourcing and offshoring. Outsourcing tends to be focused on delivering an outcome. Offshoring tends to be you establishing your own people with your own culture, your own organisation, your own management, your own IP, your own tacit knowledge being installed in there, and you own it and control it. So it's very different to outsourcing. The 3 or 4 things that I see business make a mistake on right from the outset, initially it's deciding how they should be structured here. Some organisations try to establish a business in the Philippines as you would do in Australia. You could do it overnight in Australia. We can register a company with ASIC online and we could be invoicing a client tomorrow morning. In the Philippines it's a 3 to 12 month process. There are lots of things to get right and get wrong, and it can create a financial burden that's just seriously not necessary to undertake. Therefore, the staff leasing businesses of the Philippines have grown out of that very factor. To take advantage of offshoring initiative, there are 3 fundamental things that you have to get right. The first is that you need to make sure that your business at home is prepared, organised. The housekeeping is done in such a way that you can accommodate change within your business. Your own business in Australia can scuttle a very good offshoring initiative. So if you don't have the key stakeholders in your organisation squared away, no amount of effort that you put in over here in the Philippines will work. So you need to have that right. And the second is that you need to make sure that you partner with the right organisation here, someone that's an organisation that's tuned into your business, has an understanding of your organisation, and is prepared to not just source good staff for you, because to be honest with you, that's not a difficult thing to do. There are a lot of people with highly trained skills and experiences here that can be tuned into your business very quickly. But having the organisation that's going to hold your hand, help you manage that startup process is kind of critical. So select carefully. And the final step is very much one that Loda was touching on, and that is that remote management is one of the most difficult things in the world to do. So much of your own management technique and what you do day in, day out is almost subliminal. You deal with it as a matter of your own learning and your own experience in business, but doing it on the other side of the world is like trying to do it with your eyes closed and your ears turned off. If you're not deliberately making actions to guide and direct and train and tune in your offshore business, you will get it wrong. Whilst the Philippines is probably the premium location in all of Asia to support an offshoring solution to Australia, being Christian-based, it has the Philippines hold a great deal of the moral and ethical values that we hold in business in Australia. Unlike anywhere else in Asia, that lack of Christian background, it makes the Philippines quite unique. Their quality of English is, as Mike has pointed out, is exceptional by comparison to anywhere else in Asia. English is schools. In schools, English is the base language used for teaching. But the culture itself is very different, and you cannot afford to assume to deal with people in exactly the same manner that you would do in Australia. You have to respect the fact that there is cultural differences. You need to take it on board and work it to your advantage. So tuning your staff in when you first start up is a worthwhile investment in time and in money. Getting it right, and it sort of sets the mould for you to be able to duplicate that hand over fist as your business grows over here. It's nothing to start with one or two employees over here. It's low risk. There's low cost of entry, and get it right, and it will snowball from there, and it has a significant impact on the cost of your business. So getting those 3 or 4 things right are fundamental. There's a few peripherals around the edges that can trip you up. I promise you, a trusted agent in the Philippines is kind of fundamental. You need to have a partner in the process. You can't afford to try and do it exclusively on your own and using your own experience from Australia. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you very much, Lee, and great observations as you go through as usual. Miss Aya, you have Straight Arrow, which is a specialised service. You're a marketing company. I know a lot of your clients. They're friends, and they've also, many of them have been on my tour. You have very small clients, and you have large clients, and you do a range of different things for different clients. Occasionally, a client doesn't get it, and things fall apart a little bit. And but in the vast majority of your current clients actually think you're a wonderful service, and they're absolutely rave about what you do. Let's talk about the ones that are mistakes and come crashing down. Let's talk about some of the mistakes you see and what you think they can do to avoid those, please.
Okay, Mike. Between Lee and Lota, a lot of them have already been covered. There's 3 or 4 also from our end that I'd like to focus on, though. One is assumptions. I think when things don't go right in creative process outsourcing, when we come up with an execution, a design that is not what the client expects, a lot of it is because, one, there's assumptions that both sides make. And the other one is time. We've dealt with a lot of Australian clients, and they're chill people. They're really great. I mean, compared to other clients in the world, they're a lot more relaxed. So our teams are also more relaxed. These are creatives, but many of them have everything they want to do clearly in their heads, but they couldn't put it down on paper. They're either too busy, or they've never really needed to do it before. So getting into that mode of capturing your thoughts, putting it on paper in a proper brief that the teams can refer to, that can be a challenge. Sometimes they come on the tours very excited, we're as excited with them, and then they go back to Australia and they become very busy again. And so we get into calls and there's very little time to discuss. What they know is clear, what they can see in their minds, but hard for us to grasp. So, and then 3, unclear goals. It's good and it's bad sometimes that they come and see us. It can be bad when they have all of these new ideas and they don't know where to start, and it's not clear what they want to accomplish out of, you know, an inbound marketing campaign or a social media campaign, because they're just all fired up. And then finally, it's testing the waters. I think of outsourcing as a relationship, the same kind of business relationship we would try to have in Australia or in the Philippines, a vendor-client type of relationship. I think a lot of that has to do with the fit. So I think some of our clients get into outsourcing too fast without trying to see if the culture matches, if the values match, if the processes match. And some of them take too long. So they have to find a middle ground. I think the best way to do that is to do some pilot projects to test, to give themselves and us an opportunity to see if we can work together. If the timing is everything, and also alignment can be everything. Straight Arrow is a creative process outsourcing company. Process is plays a big part in what we do. So we need to get into discovery calls, we need to get into proper briefings, we need to go into checkpoint calls. Some of our clients find that tedious. So those are the 4 things, I think. Making a lot of assumptions, not investing enough time, not setting clear goals, and not testing the waters.
Thank you very much. Mark, you're an Australian accountant. In fact, in Melbourne, you have an ordinary accountancy firm, a standard accountancy firm like normal accountants do. And, of course, in the Philippines, you own a company that employs Filipino accountants and supplies accountants to your fellow accountants in Australia. When I want to set a business up in Australia, I come up with a name and I go and register the domain, and I possibly register the domain, and then at some stage, pretty early in the piece, I pick up the phone and call you, my accountant. And you go out and you say, well, Mike, I think you should structure it this way. You should incorporate the company, make your family directors and shareholders, and away you go, and you structure it, of course, accordingly. So incorporating a company in Australia, of course, is a 6 or 7 minute, 8 minute, a few minutes, it only takes a few minutes, and bang, it's done. I understand that incorporating, when I come to the Philippines, is there any particular reason why I shouldn't just do it exactly the same way you would in Australia? Incorporate a company and away you go. So let's hear what Mark's got to say about this.
This is true. We could talk all day about this one topic. We timed ourselves. In Australia, we can incorporate a business in about 8 minutes, and I also timed it in the Philippines. It took approximately 8 months by the time it was all said and done, and it was blood, sweat and tears all the way. I had to take staff off my accounting practice to dedicate them to just dealing with the bureaucracy that exists in the Philippines. And this is actually one of the mistakes that, for me personally, that I'm always battling with, is I take my Australian view of the world and I overlay that on what I'm doing in the Philippines and expect the same thing. It's not going to happen. It's a different country, different culture. Everything's different. You know, there's a lot of similarities, but it's like stepping back into the 1970s when it comes to trying to operate a business. See, I echo a lot of what was said already by the guys on the panel here. You know, I've got a couple of clients that use IS service there and love it. You know, I echo what the other guys are talking about systems and training. This is where I mean, I've just jotted down 3 points that I see can go wrong, and so far in our BPO, we haven't really had many issues because we really vet the clients carefully before they come in, so there's no expectation gaps. I almost call it an anti-sell. I really push their expectations down as much as possible and make it as realistic, and in the end they're actually blown away when they do start, but I want to make sure that's said right up front, and if I sense that the firm I'm talking to is not on the same page, I don't take them on as a client. I'm just not interested. But one of the things that's important, so I've just jotted down 3 things, and one of the, which I think Lee echoed on earlier, was it's really important that the business owner is not the only person that is on board with this whole thing. It's no good if you come up here as a business owner and you think this is fantastic and you go home and you try and tell your staff about this, they're probably not going to share your enthusiasm. You know, they're going to be fearful of the unknown. They're going to be fearful of communicating with somebody overseas, possibly for the first time. They're going to be fearful maybe for their jobs. There's all sorts of things. So it's important to get your team on board as quickly as possible in Australia as well. I also see an issue in terms of managing the team. So I can give an example. This is, I guess it ties in with my first point, is I had an accounting firm. So we've had a couple that didn't work out along the way. One of them I just didn't vet him very well at all, so he shouldn't have come in. But the second one was a situation where it was a new accounting firm. The owner of the firm was very enthusiastic, went back to Australia. She hired 2 people in the Philippines, and then she proceeded to go out running around building her business while the 2 accountants were left in Australia to manage the team, mentor and train the team. Guess what? They had no interest in doing that. So I'm always talking to our staff here, and one of the girls emailed me one day and said, oh, you know, Sir Mark, I'm a 4-year experienced CPA and they've got me doing 2 hours a day of data entry. And I said, well, that's not on, is it? I won't repeat the language I actually used, but I called the firm and said, well, what are you doing? So long story short, it wasn't going to work like that. Her staff were not engaged with the process and had no interest in it. So we turned it off and redeployed the staff to other firms. The other thing too is this is not a warm body on a seat, and this comes back to the expectations. A lot of people I talk to, they just think that by putting someone on the Philippines is going to cure all their problems in Australia or wherever they happen to be. It's just not. It's not a magic bullet. It's like any other employee, and the guy spoke about it earlier. You need to treat them like you treat your other staff in Australia, and you need to train them and spend that time training them. And I'm happy to say that all the firms that we deal with in our office have done that. Most of them have actually come to the Philippines. We've had over 20 staff in the last couple of years go back to Australia for training. We've got some staff that are heading over to the UK in a few months to do training, and it's critical. The more you put in, the better outcome you're going to get at the other end. And I've got firms that are telling me they've got staff in our office here that are doing a better job after 1 year than their 8-year experienced accountants in Australia. So that's really important. And finally, just quickly, is the management of the team. I know accountants are horrendous at this. They get busy and they are unresponsive. And if you've got staff sitting here you need to know what they're doing. You need to keep them accountable, and it's one of the cultural differences, right? So the staff here, they're not going to speak up. They'll just sit there, and if the Australian on the other side, well, they'll say, oh, well, they're not asking for anything. They must be busy and they must be going well. And the Filipinos saying, oh, well, they're not giving me something, so I'll just wait until they give me something. And you've got this silence on both sides. So it's really important that everyone's communicating and managing the workflow really well along the way. So they're my tips. There's 100 other things that can go wrong, but they're the critical things.
All right, sorry there, right? Yeah, let's just like to remind everybody that you do, when you get it right, it's an amazing resource and it gives an amazing return on, but we just keep frustrated that we see people getting it wrong and thing. So one of the questions I've got at the moment is what are the very first steps to outsourcing in the Philippines? And from my point of view, I've got to tell you, I think you should try and learn about what you're doing before you start. Certainly my tour is designed to overcome that problem, so doing a tour before you start is a big, big boost. But listen, a comment made earlier on, you can start with one person here very, very easily, very, very low cost and very, very low risk. So hiring one person and cutting your teeth and understanding and working out what you're doing and not doing with a good resource behind you in there trying to help you make sure the relationship works is probably a big tip. I think the biggest mistake which I see is trying to start too big, too quickly. That's huge, a huge mistake. I personally, when we came up with Mini Movers, hired one. She worked out to be brilliant. She's still around today. Then within a few weeks we hired more because we found that she was so fantastic. So just start with one, learn what you're doing and ramp it up there. But you really do need to learn what you're doing first because there are a lot of things that you would assume are different. But having said that, a big point I want to make that it's as complicated here in running a business as it is in Australia, and it's as easy and simple here as it is in Australia running a business. What I'm trying to say to you is, in the big picture, running a team of people here is almost exactly the same as Australia. So another mistake I often see is people changing things when they come here. If you've been doing it a certain way in Australia, do it the same way when you come up here. Don't change it. Don't suddenly change stuff. It's quite amazing. So if you spend a lot of time with your staff and you encourage your staff and you're a leader and you're giving a good vision and you're saying this is where we're going, will you do exactly the same up here and you'll get the same results? You really will. So employing people up here and ignoring them, not connecting with them, just treating them as, I don't know, something that's just remote is a crazy way. And a lot of that may have to do with how the industry evolved, by the way, because 20 years ago when this industry first started and the big nationals came in, they really hired a lot of robotic type workers, just running robotic systems and followers, and that's all they had. And of course, with the SMEs coming in, we want smarter people, we want people that can think for themselves. And if I've demonstrated anything to you today, I hope that between the people on the panel here, you must understand there is a lot of very, very smart people here that really know what they're doing. They're very, very low in cost. They're well educated. They're great English. They're a great resource. You just need to learn how to use that bit properly, and then you're right, and away we go. So I think that covers off our question before. There was a question for Lee, and we'll let Lee come in. Were you primarily talking about establishing your own business in the Philippines as opposed to staff leasing or offshoring? Well, I can tell you now that staff leasing or offshoring are different things. One is offshoring, one is staff leasing. I'll let Lee talk about that, starting your own business.
Okay, so my earlier comments were about the pitfalls and the difficulties, the traps that you can fall into, the landmines you can step on, probably are exactly the same for any one of those three potential outcomes, whether you choose to incorporate a business here, use staff leasing or an outsource application. They're all fraught with the same stumbling blocks if you get it wrong. You need to understand what staff leasing is. Staff leasing is the magic solution to all, from my point of view. It's a vehicle that lets you start an offshore operation without the risks of putting up the upfront capital to incorporate a business here, and it also acts as a vehicle to get you to an offshore incorporated business if that's where you're choosing to go. The one thing I will warn against, and that's outsourcing, tends to be something where you do lose control of the operation because you're buying an outcome and not the people. And if you have to invest your own intellectual property and tacit knowledge into making that happen, then you're sort of giving that away. So it's kind of important that you hold on to it. The incorporation process itself, as Mark talked about, is absolutely right. I commend him. He did it in 8 months. My first trial was 12 months. Good on you. It's not something that you should entertain. And I had a government department behind me, for goodness sake. I had all the leverage in the world to make that happen, and it's not something that you can do quickly and easily. So why distract yourself with the capital investment requirements, with the organisation and the administration of getting that started? It's a much more efficient way of following any one of the panelists' organisations can provide a low cost of entry, a low risk of getting it started and trying it out, and all of the experience and the knowledge necessary to help you get it right the first time, and then it'll snowball from there. You'll be able to funnel your business into this opportunity as you see fit and in the places where you think it's important for you to do so. So yep, I've watched a dozen organisations try to go straight to go, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go straight to incorporation, and it's a disaster. And I was moving an operation that went from 15 people to 300 people in 3 or 4 years. So if any opportunity lent itself to being incorporated, it was it. It had all of the volume and the size of business to substantiate an incorporation. But if I had have done that from day one, the business would have fallen over before I got incorporated. So, word of warning there. Remember, staff leasing it only serves two purposes. It either provides the vehicle for you to have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people working offshore and supporting your business and delivering lower cost of operation, or it acts as a vehicle for you to get to an incorporated application once the commercial model substantiates that's the right thing to do. Hope that answered your question.
Excellent. Just point out to everybody there are 7 different ways you can engage people or engage specialised services. They're all different, and you've only got a couple of them here today. But the one we've just touched on, of course, is incorporating, which is the same model as what you do in Australia. On the tour, we very clearly teach you that if you're going to start with less than 25 income.
Unmuted.
The camera's there. I can see you.
Yep.
Okay, I think you can now hear me. We'll come back. Something happened just there. But there are 7 different ways that you can offshore itself, and one of them, of course, is incorporating, the same as Australia. Sadly, it's not the same as Australia. It's very different. And what we tell you on tour, if you're starting with less than 25 people or less than 2 or 3 years experience, do not incorporate. We still get people that listen to us occasionally, but it amuses us with what you're doing. Look, we're going to finish with a question to Ms. Loda, and a relevant question because we've been talking about staff leasing. Loda, is it possible that you have a task-based that you can have task-based employees, like a specific task performance. It may not be a whole.
All right, I think I can answer that question. Yes, it's done. Huh? Okay. Are we good? Okay. So let me answer that question. Yes, we can have solutions wherein it will be task-based, though majority of our staff are full-time and dedicated to their clients. But we do have ad hoc solutions. The best is to talk to me about it and see if it's better for you to have a part-time person or to have a full-time person. Know that we also do business audits for free. Like I can take a look at your operations closely in Australia, and then we can make our recommendations. So yes, it can be done. I hope that answers your question. Back to you, Mike.
Okay.
Speak.
All right, guys. Can you hear me now, all right? Yeah. All right, we're going to wind it up here. This is definitely the last question. This is a question for Mark. I can't quite see the question, I'm sorry. Okay, as someone's looking to offshore one or two staff members into the financial services industry, Mark, have you got any tips on how do you select the right staff member?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Last year we had over 7,000 people apply to work with us. That was just from the JobStreet website alone, plus we had referrals. And out of that, in that period, we only hired 69. So in terms of how to find the right person, it comes down to what you value. So when it comes to Australian accounting skills, they don't know anything about Australia generally, unless you get lucky. They're going to come in with general accounting skills, but you're going to need to teach them how to do Australian tax, how to do Australian lodgements and things like that, superannuation, various Australian things. So what we're looking for first is a cultural fit, and then I'm going to be looking at attitude, and then finally I'll be looking at what skills they bring to the table. And what we do, there's a fairly extensive process. The staff will go through a series of interviews. They're going to go through several rounds of testing, aptitude testing, skills-based testing, English testing and things like that. So while there are actually a lot of candidates in the Philippines, we're pretty picky who comes in. Most of the people that are unsuccessful, it's either an attitude type issue where they're just looking for money or they're looking for a ticket to Australia or something like that, and we get those in every day. Yeah, they're the main issues I find. So it's more of an art than a science, I think, because and then once you get your person working, you don't really know until after they start if they're going to be a rock star or if they're just going to be an average performer. So hence from there we have a probationary period as well with regular appraisals. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's more of an art than a science, I think, in terms of getting the right person into the organisation.
One, two. Hello, 1, 2. I'm back with you. We're here. Okay, fine. We're going to move on. We are going to carry on, take a couple more questions while people are saying keep taking questions here instead of finishing off the webinar, so that's good. So the question is, I've been offshoring since 2007. for handling different back office services for my company in creative services. More recently, I've been helping companies get into offshoring, providing remote HR services such as hiring, training and management. I'm trying to figure out which direction to take my company. Where do you see the gaps or opportunities in offshoring for the new players to come into? Look, I'd probably like to try and address that, I suppose. I think staff leasing and seat leasing and those things are now getting quite saturated. There is room for a few more, but it's specialising right into niches now. What I'm seeing is the emergence of very, very specialised opportunity of very, very specialised services. Back to these services over there, sort of a cross between an outsourcing model and an offshoring seat leasing model where, like Mark, a specialised service, an accountancy service, he brings in Filipino accountants, he trains them up in Australian standards, and then he turns around to accountants in Australia and says, I've got them here, already trained, all ready to go. I think that's where the future is, and I think it's going to cry across all the other industries, no matter where they are. I know a company that's emerging here in transport. It's got people that are specialising in transport, and that's all they do is do that. I'm seeing a lot of other specialised ones around. So I don't know if anybody else on the panel would like to have a go at where they think the industry's going in the future or the opportunities are right now. Maybe Phil, who's just been on tour, you could talk a little bit about why you went on tour and maybe where you see the opportunities fresh after a tour at the moment.
Yeah, look, I'm a really big believer in you need a coach or a mentor. A scenario was given to me once: if somebody delivered a computer in bits in a box and said, here's your computer, go for it, it'd take you a year to work out how to put all the electronics together and work it all out. And various stages of that. What if they gave you a book that came with it? You'd get it done faster. And then what if they delivered it with a computer systems engineer? Then you'd have it done in a day. So one of the big things that I did was I tried to suck a heap of information out of Mike, and I hit him with lots and lots of questions. And in the end, it came down. He could only give me so much. Just like that, and much like trying to get a haircut over the telephone, it just ended up being so much easier to come to the location. And now that I've been here and I've just literally done it, I really see what he means. You can't pump everything into a 1 hour webinar, for example. Doing the tour for me has just made it so much more fast, so much more efficient. One of the things about the nature of the trends and stuff that I think that is emerging is this whole specialised service things. I can go to an accountant over here now and I can have that service running instantly, or marketing or any sort of industry they want, you can have it done straight away. So if you can specialise, if your business can be done, why are you just doing it for people? I think the biggest trend now is much like the accounting service, with Mark, like he can outsource his business, his process to other accountants. I think that's a massive thing. If you can do it well for clients, you could probably do it well for other companies to sell to clients, and then that takes away a whole lot of hassle. And I think that was a big thing that's emerging for me, is that ability to do it for others. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you. Can you hear me right? Okay, good. There's a question here about Filipino accountants, and are Filipino compliance laws and terminology similar to the USA, and does it take much training to get them familiar with Australian standards? I think I can address that question thing across the board, actually. This is really mini USA here, and probably the biggest challenge you have is Americanization. They are very, very Americanized, and yes, the accountants here, the Filipino CPAs are American CPAs, which are very, very different than Australian CPAs. However, when you go to university and learn accountancy, it is theoretical accountancy, which is taught exactly the same everywhere in every university in the world. And the difference is in your local rules, your local conditions, and those sort of things. It is so when Mark brings accountants in, he pulls the Australian Tax Act out and all the CPA training stuff, and he trains them and he Australianises those accountants. They're already good accountants, but they need to be Australianised. And Australianising doesn't matter if it's accountants, marketing, it doesn't matter whether it's whatever you're doing, you need to Australianise them. Cut the American stuff out and put the Australianised bit in there. And that's what most of the training is up here. It's about getting them and your processes and Australianising them at the same time. That's why we're talking about taking them to other countries to train them and bringing them up to speed. It happens very, very quickly. I believe that you can probably produce a competent Australian accountant, competent Filipino accountant, and turn him into an Australian accountant probably within a few months or a few weeks to a few months, very, very quickly indeed. So that is one of the challenges. It's one of the things we show on tour. Talking back to what Phil was talking about the tour just before, the tour used to be 5 days, and we've taken it and we've condensed it to 3 days to make it viable, and also to give you a couple of days to relax afterwards and try and go back and revisit some of the stuff. There's that much stuff to learn, and yes, I talk to people nearly every day on the phone, and I'm well aware that they're listening to me and hanging on me and trying to work out how they think they should do it. And I'm telling you that it takes me 3 days from 8 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night, full on concentrated, to teach you just the fundamentals so that you get it right. So talking to me for a half an hour on the phone, listening to one of my webinars, very sadly, you're not going to learn it all. You're only going to learn little tidbits, and that's probably one of the reasons a lot of people get into trouble. They learn a little bit, and a little bit makes them rather dangerous. And so that's why we invented the tours. The tours is the only way to truly learn it all before you start, and it's 3 days on. It's concentrated. We're all exhausted today. We've just had 3 days of go, 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 go. Yes, we visited over 30 places. We also had 2 3 to 4 hour sessions in a room, running through hundreds of slides and looking at different angles as well. So it's pure education. It's focused, concentrated things. So to crank it up, yes, I conduct 3-day intensive business learning tours. I take you on an amazing offshoring entrepreneurial journey. You're going to see a lot of different ways that you can engage people or services, and you're going to see it with the do's and don'ts. And you're going to see very, very simple, cost-effective ways you can develop your business or a new business, because a lot of my people coming on tour also start new businesses. You're going to learn from real entrepreneurs doing it. This is not theoretical. There's a lot of people you meet on the tour, and they've all been there and all done it, and they're all going to share what went wrong and tell you what went wrong. They're going to also share what went right too, and you're going to learn a lot out of that. And that's a really, really powerful way for you to learn. You learn from the mistakes of others and everything else. So, okay, so some tour norms. Let's talk about what is normal for people when they come on tour and after the tour. Look, most people that come on tour do convert some or part of their existing back office roles and move them up here. Yes, some people move a few jobs up here. It's really interesting though, because most of us have got substantial operations here. The vast majority of the jobs in those operations aren't actually jobs out of Australia. They're actually new jobs that we've added in, because very quickly we learn that we can build new processes. We can do things that we couldn't possibly do in Australia that adds a lot of value to our clients and our customers. So most of us, we move a few jobs up, and then suddenly we go, wow, but we can also do all this other stuff as well. In my case with Mini Movers, it was marketing. I'm running a marketing process up here you couldn't dream of doing in Australia, but you can do it here with this cost base. It's very, very easy. So most of the jobs in Mini Movers in the Philippines are actually new jobs. They're not jobs moved out of Australia. Many of you are also, as well as building your own offices and your own teams, are also going to engage some of the specialised services, very much like Aya and Mark are here. They're going to engage specialised services while you're here. And a few of you are going to start new businesses. Things that we're currently seeing being done are training Australianised workers for industry, and accountants is a classic example of that, but we're also seeing it in law. We're seeing it in just about every other business as well, transport, whole lots of different businesses. Running processes for an industry is quite common now. Expanding sales into other countries is the big thing, and you heard Mark talk about, I'm an Australian, I started in Melbourne, I came up here to do my back offices, then suddenly I decided, wow, I can sell this to other accountants. Now he's worked out he can also sell it into the UK, and he can, why? Because it's just as easy to get UK accountants here as it is Australian or Americanised ones, so it's quite easy for him to do that. And that's not unusual to him doing that. And of course, many of us invent new business offices completely. And we'll repeat something I said earlier on. The focus now is on higher quality workers and working away from the robotic processes of the start. This is no longer about monkey see, monkey do. It's no longer about getting robotic workers sitting down running structured processes and just following a set system. So, we're down one more. So I want to finish up. I have written a book on this subject. It's called The Efficient $100 a Week Worker. It's probably a good point for you to start. Certainly coming on my tour is the next thing to do. What I'm going to do is, if you want the book, I want you to email me. That is my personal email address you see there. It will come to me. And mike@o'hagan.com.au. So mike@o'hagan.com.au. Email me, please, directly, and we'll click reply and send you a copy of the book. It doesn't come through any other way. It's the easiest way of doing it. It's a fairly short, quick read. I think you can read it in 1 or 2 hours, and it'll give you an overview of what's going on, some of the opportunities there. It's not everything. It can't be everything. The tour is going to teach you a lot more, but it's going to give you a good fundamental. And I think with the permission of everybody who's attended this webinar today and all my panel, I think my people should email the contact names and addresses of everybody who's been sitting on this panel as a guest and everything else to everybody who came here, so that you can contact any of them with any of your questions and ask them about anything you want. I'm sure I know them all personally. They're all good friends of mine, and they're all willing to help and help you make sure that you get it right when you do that. So on that very note, we're going to wind up now. My next tour date is on the October the 19th. I'm having a break for a little while now, so my next tour date is on October the 19th. We do have some tours in November that are full. I think we may be going to release some dates later in November, but right now, October the 19th, between the 19th and the 21st is the next tour date, and I think we'll include that in the email that we send out to everybody on the webinar as well. So thank you very much. I hope you've learned something. I do appreciate your feedback. If you can give me some feedback, I want to know if this experiment, by the way, of having a panel like this was a great help to you. I really would like to know. I think it's a great way to learn people that are really doing it. So thank you very much, and I wish you all a good day.